Right, the week up ahead, we read the Parsha of Vayeira. Starts with the angels appearing to Avram Avinu, to Abraham, as he is sitting outside his tent. He's just given himself a bris. And we know the whole scenario, the whole beautiful story about these angels, about how they come to tell him, particularly that he's going to have a son, he's going to have Yitzchak. But I think the essence of this parsha is actually contained in the story of the Akedat Yitzchak. The Akedah being the offering, the attempted offering or the near offering. The fact that Avram Avinu, that Abraham was instructed by God to take his son, to take Yitzchak, to offer him up on the mountain, we know the rest of the story. This piece of Torah is positioned in some very, very important places in our liturgy, in our Jewish thinking, and in fact, in all of Judaism. The story of the Akedah we read on Rosh Hashanah. The story of the Akedat Yitzchak, we in fact read every single day in our davening. If you have a look in any siddur at the preamble to morning prayers, after we've said our brachot, and before we get to the actual Shacharit service, we go through the story of the Akedat Yitzchak. We read, you'll recognize it. It's the latter part it's the end part of the Parsha that we're going to read on Shabbos. We read through the whole Akedat Yitzchak, this whole story about how Avram takes Yitzchak, how they go together, how they find the animal caught by the horn in the thicket, etc., etc., etc. The whole story is read there. And when we complete reading it, we say a Yehi Ratzon, we say a Ribono Shel Olam. May it be the will, God. We address God and we say, God, you've heard this whole story about Akedat Yitzchak, about the offering up of Isaac. You've heard the whole story about Avram Avinu and his self-sacrifice. You've heard all of that. We want you similarly, God, to take away any anger that you might have against us, to allow that in merit of these great deeds of our forefathers. We want you to take away any anger that you might have against us, any negativity that you might have against us. We use this every day as a preamble to our davening. This story about the Akedah clearly has a very, very deep, profound, and important role to play in our daily interaction with God, in our daily interaction with ourselves, and in our daily interaction with the world. And then it is repeated in a way on Rosh Hashanah, on the day on which we are rededicating ourselves to God, on the day on which we are proclaiming God as our King. We once again read nothing other than this. The first day we read about the birth of Yitzchak, and the second day we read about the Akedat Yitzchak, the offering of Isaac. It's obviously powwow, it's big power story and big power message for each and every one of us in everything that we do. So let's spend a little while today reviewing some of the essential features of the story, but not the details about the ram and Avraham Avinu going up and coming down and so on, but really the essence. Let's try and get to the essence of what was so powerful about the story. What made this the defining moment in our forefathers' lives, and what made this the story that we repeat every single day and on Rosh Hashanah as well. So let me begin with a story of our own. It's always good to demonstrate things with stories, right? So here's a story. The Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, who was a Talmid, he was a pupil of the Magid of Mezrich. He tells the story of three stove cleaners that he listened to one evening in the Beis Medrash in the shul of the Magid, where he was lying down and supposedly about to fall asleep. Who were the stove cleaners? So he says there that these great sages of old, people like the Magid or the Baal Shem Tov and so on, they had a group of people to whom they were prepared to reveal the deep depths of the knowledge and wisdom and understanding that they had. And they were prepared to share their secrets of mysticism, Kabbalah, Chassidut, and so on. And not everybody merited to actually learn from them directly. You know, when Moshe Rabbeinu taught the Torah, he didn't necessarily teach it to each and every individual in the same way. He first shared it with Aaron, and then it was with Eliezer, and then with the elders, and they shared it then with the rest of the Jewish people. Not everybody got the essence from the actual source. And there were a few very privileged Talmidim, a few very privileged students, one of whom was the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi. And he writes that on one particular evening, he was lying down on a bench in the Beis Medrash, or he had his head down, he was about to chap a little dremel, when he overheard three of the, what he calls the stove cleaners. Now, the stove cleaners, as we said, were people who hadn't made the grade, so to speak, to actually learn directly from the Magid. They were intelligent guys. They were Hasidic gentlemen. But what they thought was appropriate, and it's actually something to think about in terms of Jewish support for Torah institutions as well, which is regarded as a high form of tzedakah, was I can't necessarily study directly from the Magid. I can't necessarily learn directly from the Rebbe, but I can serve his students. And so there were a bunch of people who looked after the very needs of the Talmidim, of the students of the Magid. They would provide the food for them, they would cook for them, they would make sure that their clothing was in order, etc. And they would see to the warmth in the building where they were staying. They would make sure that the stoves were serviced, that the stoves were cleaned, that the coals were placed back in the stoves in order for the heat to carry on in that building, in that shul, in that Beis Medrash, so that the Talmidim, so that the students could carry on with their Torah study. In this way, they believed that they were doing something for the Magid. They were allowing his students, his Talmidim, to be able to learn. So he goes on and he says, one night he's lying down there and he overhears three of these stove cleaners having a discussion. Somebody else joining there? Are you in? Good.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So stove cleaners are having a discussion. And the topic of their discussion is the Akedah. The three of them are discussing the Akedat Yitzchak. And the first one says, this sounds like, all the jokes that they tell. All the jokes that they tell about, three people who are bragging about, I'm greater than you and you greater than me and my wife is better than yours, etc. Or I've got an even better son or a better doctor. Here, they were discussing the Akedah. And the first guy says, I don't understand really what is so great about the Akedah. What was so great about this offering? And he says, if God would have said to me that I should offer up my son, I would have done it as well. What's the great deal here? I would also have done it. I would also have offered up my son. Says the Alter Rebbe, and he went on to say, maybe the greatness is that Avraham Avinu did it with enthusiasm. He woke up early in the morning and he went ahead and he did it. He did the offering and he did it without a delay. It says, Vayashkem Avraham Babeker. It says in the story, Abraham got up early in the morning. Now, what was he going to do? He was going to offer up his son. He knew what a heavy, heavy story it was, but he got up early and he said, I'm going to do it without delay. God has asked me to do it. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. So he says, maybe that's what it was. Because I think that if God asked me to go and offer up my son, I would probably say to myself, you know, I'd like to spend another day with him. I'd like to spend another few days with him. Let me delay it. Let me do it a week from Wednesday. I'll do it. You know, I'm ready to do it. But let me do it a week from Wednesday. Let me have a last chance to spend some time with my dear son before I go and kill him. Maybe that was the reason. The Alter Rebbe says he's lying there and listening. And then the next one chimes in and he says, I don't know if it was that. That Avraham Avinu did it just without a delay, is that great enough? I agree with you. If God would appear to me and God would say to me that I must take my son and I must offer him up as an offering to God, I would do it as well. But maybe I wouldn't do it with the same kind of joy that Avraham Avinu had. Abraham does this all with joy. He does it with a smile. He is happy to do it. There's not he says, you know what? I would have been crying. I would maybe have taken my son and maybe I would have been able to do it without delay. But I probably would have been bawling my eyes out. I would have been saying, why me? God, I don't understand. I'll do it. But I'm upset to do it. Avraham Avinu goes positive. He goes with a smile. He is happy to fulfill God's will. Maybe that's the reason. And the third one says the Alter Rebbe, the third one says, you know what, if God asked me to sacrifice my son, I would have done it as well. I probably would have been able to pluck up the courage to do it right away because I know that God wants things done immediately. Because we're Hasidim, I probably would have done it with a smile as well. Because we take a positive outlook on everything. I would have been happy to do it. But I think that the main thing about Avraham Avinu was that when he found out that he wasn't to sacrifice his son, he was still happy. He was still happy, even when he found out that he wasn't going to sacrifice his son. Because now he had the opportunity to fulfill another mitzvah. God says to him now, no, don't do it. Now I want you to take the animal and offer it up. You're not going to offer up the sacrifice of Yitzchak anymore. That's not going to happen. And Avraham Avinu was joyous. He was happy, even when he couldn't fulfill what it was that God wanted from him at that time, because God gave him another mitzvah to fulfill. Alter Rebbe is lying there, and he says he was blown away by this discussion. Blown away by the discussion of these three stove cleaners, these three people who are fulfilling this incredible, simple task. They seem to be simple people. I don't know why we're getting people going out and coming in. I'm not sure. What are we losing? Losing some people here. What's going on? Is there something wrong with the internet? I don't know. Okay. Everybody comfortable? Good. Okay. So he says, God is demanding of a person to go and do the sacrifice. These three simple Jews are having this discussion about, I would have done it, but maybe not with joy. I would have done it maybe with a delay. I would have done it, but I probably wouldn't have been so happy when God called me off and told me not to do it anymore. And in fact, they're touching on something incredible that we see immediately after this. It's brought about in next week's parsha. Next week's parsha is called Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. And we see that immediately Sarah dies. And we're told at the beginning of the parsha that Sarah Imenu, died after the Akedah. She died after this. Why did she die? What caused her to die? So the Mefarshim differ in what actually caused her to die. There is an opinion that Sarah Imenu died because she heard about the Akedah. So some kind of troublemaker came along and ran to her and said, did you hear what happened? Did you hear what happened? Avraham Avinu, Abraham, your husband, took your son Yitzchak, that you waited 90 years to have. He took him and he was going to take him to offer him up on the mountain. And it says that Sarah Imenu caught a fright and she had a heart attack. I don't know what happened from a physical point of view, but she died of fright that her son had been offered up on the mountain. There's a deeper opinion that says that when this troublemaker came and told her, which it was probably an angel who told her, that she didn't die from the fright of the Akedah. She didn't die from the fright of the fact that Yitzchak was offered up on the mountain, or hearing about that Yitzchak was offered up on the mountain. She died of the fact that the angel went on to tell her that Avraham Avinu didn't shecht him, that he didn't slaughter him, that in fact his life was spared. And Sarah Imenu died of the heartache of thinking that her son was not worthy of this offering. Can you imagine the level? Can you imagine the thought? The fact that her son was taken up the mountain, that Avraham Avinu went to listen to God, Sarah Imenu could live with. She couldn't live with the fact that maybe her son wasn't worthy of this sacrifice. Now, these things sound absolutely, absolutely absurd to us in a way, because can we dream about, can we think about the horror of, God forbid, a sacrifice of a child? It's abhorrent. It's something that we can't really relate to. But yet all these people talking about it, there's obviously something that we need to uncover, that we need to explore, that we need to think about when it comes to Akedat Yitzchak, to truly understand what message is it really conveying to us. What is Akedat Yitzchak really about? And what do we have to learn from it on a daily basis and on a lifelong basis as well? So let's think about, throughout Jewish history, I think you'll agree with me, there have been many people who've had to give up their lives, and give up their lives for being Jewish. We don't have to look very far to think about people who are prepared to sacrifice their lives for being Jewish, or for Israel, or for God. Think about our boys and girls on the borders of Israel. Think about the people who've perished in all the wars of Israel. Think about people who have placed their lives on the line to save others in any kind of a circumstance. Think about those who died in the Holocaust. Think about those who were persecuted over the many, many hundreds and hundreds of years of persecution against the Jewish people, where people died on what we call Al Kiddush Hashem. Think about people who were lined up and told that unless you convert to Christianity or to any other way of life or whatever, we're going to kill you. Think about all of that. This was, they had what we call loosely termed Mesiras Nefesh. They had this ability to give up their lives for God and for godliness. What was greater here with Avraham Avinu? Why is Abraham's Akedat Yitzchak regarded as the main event that we quote on a daily basis and on Rosh Hashanah as well? Why is it that this is more powerful? What message does it hold that's even deeper? What is more significant about it? We could magnify the story a little bit more. If we think about perhaps suggesting that the real ask from Avraham Avinu was not that he should give up his own life, but that he should slaughter his own child, that he should offer his own child, his own son. You know, I think I'm right in saying, and I think that it's happened unfortunately all too often, where people would say in a circumstance, don't touch my child, rather kill me. You've got to do something. You know what? Take me. I've had my life. I'm an older person. Avraham Avinu is 100 years old. Rather take me. So maybe the chidush here is, and the great wondrousness of this whole thing is that Avraham Avinu was prepared to sacrifice his child. He doesn't say to God, God, take me. He doesn't say that. He goes and he sacrifices his child. Now, we might look at that as being a negative. Why doesn't he say that? Why does Avraham Avinu not say to God, God, you want somebody to sacrifice? I'm 137 years old. I've had a life. I've lived, I've done, or whatever. Yitzchak has got a future. Let him live. Take him and let him live. Avraham Avinu doesn't say that. He goes and he's ready to sacrifice his child. Maybe there's something in this. But if we think about it, unfortunately, throughout Jewish history, there have been other instances, famous ones, where people have the famous story of Hannah, who was prepared to let her children be slaughtered rather than convert, and she said, God, you're getting 7 children, where Avraham Avinu only gave you 1, or was prepared to give you 1. I'm prepared to give them all, as long as they don't take on any other deity, as long as they don't take on any other religion, as long as they don't bow down to anything else. I'm quite prepared that they should die. There was that story. There are many stories. I think we conjure up in our minds, possibly for those of us who remember the famous Sophie's Choice, the movie that was made, Sophie's Choice, where a mother is given the choice to make of which child she's going to let live and which one she's going to die, allow to die. She can only keep one alive. That sort of thing, it's happened, unfortunately, so often. And yet we don't laud and praise it. We don't think about it as the depths of the Akedat Yitzchak. What is so significant in the Akedat Yitzchak, in the offering of Isaac, that supersedes all the others and that makes it more special? What are we actually talking about? What are we thinking about? If we look a little bit deeper and we think about what actually Avraham Avinu did on that particular occasion, we maybe will come up with a very, very beautiful, powerful, and important answer. Avraham Avinu was a trailblazer. Avraham Avinu did things that nobody else had ever done before. In fact, our mystical sages tell us, mystical writings, Kabbalah, Hasidic philosophy, they speak about the things, or the thing that Avraham Avinu did for the Jewish people was much like, they talk about, could you imagine that there was a jungle? And in this jungle, nobody had ever gone through the jungle. Nobody had ever gone from one side to the next. There were wild animals, there was all sorts of stuff there, and there was no pathway through it. Thick bush, thick jungle, and lots of perils. Avraham Avinu, they say, cut a path through. He made a path through the jungle, and he got through to the other side. Now, what he did was he enabled that everybody who came after him was able also to go through the jungle. Now, they might not have always been able to follow his path exactly. But the fact is that once he'd broken through that barrier, and once he got through to the other side, he had, number one, shown that this jungle was passable. It was no longer impregnable. It was possible to get through. And he sent and he gave that message to everybody. And he had cut through some of the strands and some of the thicket and some of the animals and so on, the perils along the way. Avraham Avinu had managed to get through many of them to be able to come out the other side. He had enabled it to be possible for other people to do it afterwards. And they say that similarly, Avraham Avinu gave us a gift, which he handed down to all future generations, which is known as, and here we're going to rephrase that term again, Mesiras Nefesh. What is the best translation of Mesiras Nefesh? Mesiras Nefesh or Mesirat Nefesh means self-sacrifice. I want you to think for a moment, what is self-sacrifice? What is true, real self-sacrifice? I think usually when we think about self-sacrifice, we think about the fact that I am prepared to give up my life for somebody else, for something else, for God. I'm prepared to give up my life. That is usually what we term self-sacrifice. In a smaller way, we say, well, if I'm prepared not to eat so that somebody else can eat, I'm sacrificing part of my life, of my sustenance, and so on, to sustain somebody else. So there are different levels of self-sacrifice, but ultimately the concept of self-sacrifice means, usually, I think, I am prepared to give up my life for the cause. I'm prepared to give up my life for God. I'm prepared to give up my life for Judaism, for what I stand for Israel, and so on. That is usually what we term self-sacrifice. But isn't that life sacrifice? That's really life sacrifice. Self-sacrifice is that I'm prepared to give up myself, my sense of self, the self that governs me. You know, fortunately or unfortunately, as human beings, we are all, and all of us without exception, we are, and it's a horrible thing to say, and don't take it wrong, please don't be offended, but we're all selfish. We do things for ourselves. Let's think about it. We talk about self-preservation. If there was, God forbid, a fire in your house, the first thing that you would think about, or should think about, is saving yourself. By the way, it's a Torah instruction. We've got to do that. We shouldn't feel bad about it. You would think about saving yourself. Your sense of self governs everything that you do. Now, even if we want to get a little bit religious on each other, the concept of self even comes into the things that we do from a religious point of view. Why am I living? Why am I doing good things? We ask ourselves those questions. What's the purpose? What is the purpose for me doing mitzvahs even? We might have a number of answers to that question. One of the answers may be, I want to have olam haba. I want my soul to go to a good place after 120 years when I leave this world. I want my soul to go to a good place. In a way, then, my fulfillment of that mitzvah has got a selfish undertone. There's something about me in it. What am I doing it for? I am doing this mitzvah so that I go to heaven. Or What do I want to, why am I behaving in a correct fashion? I want to make sure that my children have a legacy that they can follow. These are very, very high and important and very powerful reasons for doing good things. I'm doing this good thing so that my children have a future that they can follow. I'm doing this good thing so that I can create a better world. Now, why do I want a better world? Why must I have a better world? So that me and my offspring, my children, my grandchildren, and then all the generations that come afterwards will have a better world to live in. I'm not sure right now if the world is getting better or worse. At the moment, things don't look so grand. You know, I mean, just think about what's going on in the election in America, where now, you know, you have a split down the middle and 50-50, and things seem to be really, really nasty, where people are nasty to each other, where there's a nastiness that seems to pervade, where you have even in a pandemic, that the whole thing becomes, you know, like you did it right and you didn't do it right. And here we have it locally as well. You're behaving, you're not behaving. We're very quick to point out faults in each other. It's happening all the time. But ultimately, isn't the defining feature in our lives and in the things that we do, good, bad, and ugly, it's self-serving. Why do the majority of people, when they do something wrong, do something wrong? There's a selfish overtone to it. I'm doing this for me to be able to gain something. I'm doing this for power. I'm doing this to fulfill my own needs, desires, lusts, and so on. I'm doing this to the detriment of somebody else. But you know what? I'm more important than somebody else. There is a selfish overtone, or a selfish undertone maybe, to just about everything that we do, good, bad, or ugly. Avraham Avinu, at the time of the Akedah, teaches us what self-sacrifice actually is. Because nothing that he is doing makes sense. Because nothing in that he's doing, when he's walking with his son to offer him up on the mountain, nothing that he is doing can have a positive outcome for him in any way. Not for him, not for his son, not for his future. He's been promised that this is the future. This is your progeny. This is your ancestry. This is what's going to come from you. This is going to carry the banner of everything that you've stood for now and in the future. And I'm asking you, God says, are you prepared to go and put it to death? Are you prepared to kill it off? What Avraham Avinu is prepared to sacrifice completely, and what he does sacrifice completely, is his self, his sense of self. What is replaced in his soul, in the depths of his soul, is the fact that up until then, everybody and anything that anybody did was only driven by self and selfish motives. Avraham Avinu, Abraham, is the first person to do this incredible act. By the Akedah, he's prepared to pass this test and to do it because God says so, and to take away the sense of self. There can be no gain. There's nothing in this for me, nothing whatsoever. Not for now, not for the future, not for my children, not for my ancestry, not for the world. This is going to benefit nothing to do with anything to do with myself. Avraham Avinu on that day is prepared to sacrifice his self. And what he does there, if you think about it just in terms of, Avraham Avinu was subjected to 10 different tests. What was the first test? The first test that he had was to stand up against Nimrod. He was prepared to say he wasn't prepared to worship that God, those gods, those idols, and they threw him in a furnace. He was thrown into a furnace. He was prepared to die for his belief in the fact that there was one and only one God. Why is that not a bigger event than here, where he's prepared to take his son and sacrifice him? Our sages point out that here he was sacrificing his self. It was the classic self-sacrifice. That's what Avraham Avinu was doing. That's what he did at that Akedah. And now it starts making sense as to why this is all part of our daily davening. Every single day, we're asking God, as we say this Akedat Yitzchak, to please God, enable me to be unselfish, to have no sense of self in anything that I'm doing, to have the ability, God, to do things just to serve you, to have the ability to fulfill a mitzvah, a positive action, and so on, just because you required it, just because you said so. Not what I'm going to get out of it, and not what praise I'm going to get from it, and not what it's going to do for the world, and not what it's going to do for my children, and not the example that they're going to have, all of which are fantastic, fantastic ideas. But to cut right through to the bottom, the ultimate of self-sacrifice is a gift that Avraham Avinu cut through the thicket. He cut through the jungles in order to enable us to creep through, to have a little sight of what real self-sacrifice is all about. And from there, he actually changed something in the souls of each and every one of us. This was planted in the soul of a Jew, this idea of what we call self-sacrifice. It doesn't necessarily only mean that I will give up my life for God. That could have a really, really a wonderful outcome, an idea, an ideal, but it could also have a slightly selfish essence. What Avraham Avinu gave us was the ability to be completely unselfish, the ability to conquer that sense of self. And this was the gift of Avraham. This was what he really gave us. Why we repeat the Akedah every single day, why we read it on Rosh Hashanah as well. It is getting rid of myself, getting rid of my sense of self, getting rid of my selfishness. This is really what Akedat Yitzchak is truly all about. So we're back at Parshas Vayeira, which means that once again, we're back on the Shabbos of what is known as the Shabbos Project. Shabbos Project, this Shabbos, where there is an appeal to everybody to try, if you're going to have the ability to keep this Shabbos, it's one that many, many thousands of people around the world, because of the Shabbos Project, are keeping this Shabbos. It's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. As, by the way, we have to say, every Shabbos is a wonderful opportunity to keep Shabbos. But yeah, just because there is the kind of internationalization, in a way, of Shabbos, we've opened the doors for thousands and thousands of people around the world to be able to keep Shabbos when they may not at any other stage. This year, I have the feeling that Shabbos Project, in a way, has got back to the basics of where it really should be. Please don't quote me too far on this, because I believe that Shabbos Project should have been much more about Shabbos in the home in the past number of years than it actually was. Shabbos actually needs to be kept by you, by me, in our homes. Shabbos needs to be kept for no other reason other than God told us to keep Shabbos. Not because I enjoy having a shlof on a Shabbos afternoon. Not because I like the cholent and the kishka and the chicken soup. Not because it makes me feel good, or because it's good for my kids, or because it's good for our future. But because God asked us to do it. And so appropriately, the Shabbos Project is on this special Shabbos, where perhaps we need to all try, as far as possible, to remove a sense of self-importance, self-aggrandizement, selfishness, anything that starts with self should be diminished in honor of the Akedat Yitzchak and in honor of Avraham Avinu, and in that way to keep Shabbos or to keep any mitzvah, because it's what God wanted us to do. We have the ability. We too can have the Mesiras Nefesh, the absolute self-sacrifice, which we're called upon to have in honor of Avraham Avinu, and we have it implanted in our souls that we actually have the ability to do it. So I want to wish you a great Shabbos up ahead, a great Shabbos project. Hopefully it won't just be a project. You know, the first time we had the Shabbos project, some of the kids were asking, you know, like, do we have to glue things in and put papers and so on and tell stories or whatever? Because it's like a school project. This is not a Shabbos project in that sense. This is a project that hopefully will become something that we do more often and very often and on any given Shabbos from here on in. So I want to wish you a great Shabbos project, a good Parshas Vayeira, and hopefully we get the message of self-sacrifice throughout and pervading everything that we do. Have a great one. Keep well, everybody. Take care. Seems to be people are not unmuting today. I don't know if there's
No,
something.
you weren't allowing us. Now we can. Thank you, Rabbi.
Not me, not allowed. I'm not that strict. Don't shout at me. I wasn't.
No, there was a notice there that says the host is not allowing people to unmute.
I
But
didn't
now
realize
it's-
I was that.
Yeah.
Now I realize that I'm the host. It says in brackets after my name that I'm the host.
You
So,
are the host. Thank you, Rabbi. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
And
Thanks
Shabbos
for joining me.
everybody.
Keep well.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care.
You
Bye.
too. Bye-bye.